Welcome to this webinar on managing information overload. I'm Dr. Monica Seeley of Mesmo Consultancy. Many of you probably already know me through my work on email best practice because we specialize at Mesmo Consultancy in helping EAs and PAs like yourself to manage email smartly to maximize the available opportunities and hence improve your productivity and well-being. And we do this through workshops, masterclasses and one-to-one coaching. And we also do it through working with yourselves and your bosses using our unique inbox audit process. I'm author of 3 books, including The Executive Secretary's Guide, Taking Control of Your Inbox, and Brilliant Email. Visiting fellow at City University and Bournemouth University, and in my spare time I'm a golfer and a qualified sommelier. And these are just a few of my clients that I've worked with over the last 3 decades. As you can see, they range from small businesses to large international corporates in the private, public and not-for-profit sector. And I'm delighted to be working with you and talking to you today about how you manage information overload. And of course, email is one of the main drivers, and we'll touch on that as we go along. However, it's really the emergence of all the new social media and collaborative tools such as MS Teams, SharePoint, Microsoft OneNote and Link, etc. That just push information at you, that's made managing information overload a much bigger challenge than, say, at the turn of the century when it was still primarily email. So what might we define information overload, and why is it such a problem? I call it information anxiety after a book that strongly influenced me by Richard Saul Wurman way back in 1989. And in fact, as you can imagine, information overload is not really new. It was actually estimated that the weekday edition of the New York Times contained as much information as a person living in the UK in the 17th century would encounter in a lifetime. What does it cost? Hard to put a figure to it. Some ideas. In 2007, it was estimated that it cost $120 to produce a sheet of A4 quotes information, facts, figures. But that the cost of information overload, and it's the only estimate I've ever really seen, and it's obviously gone up and up, the cost to an organisation was estimated at something like, or organisations as a whole, 650 billion in terms of lost productivity through the stress and through lack of productivity and losing key information. We see it, and then the next day when we want it, we can't find it, whether it's a piece of paper or whether it's something electronic. So the challenge really is that there are so many different channels pushing information at us. And the difficulty is, over the years, as each one arrives, it doesn't just replace an old one, but instead it just adds another stream or another torrent of facts and figures and even gossip. We talked about social media and collaborative tools replacing email. I don't think that's happened. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Email has marginally replaced the office memo, but I don't think social email will ever completely replace email. And it amazes me when I walk into offices, and indeed myself, when I look at the average PC, smartphone, laptop, just how many apps and systems are on them, all giving us information, bombarding us with information. From emails to social media, to conversations we have, to text, to collaborative tools. So what do we define as information anxiety or information overload? It's basically having more information than we can process. It's as simple as that. And over the years, certainly in the last 3 decades, I would suggest it has become worse. It's probably got worse by maybe 10, 20-fold with all these new sources of information. And added to that, the problem we have is not only looking at what is, it's hard to identify what is relevant to us, but now it's become what is real, what is fake. But it's a little like trying to look at the wrong end of the telescope. So where do we begin instead of looking at all this information around us, which, as I said, is like looking at the wrong end of the telescope? How do we begin to reduce the information overload to make us and help us be less stressed and more productive? Well, it's really all about identifying specifically what you need. It's the good old Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule. 80% of what you need will come from 20% of the sources that you have. But the key is to find that 20%, and that is not easy. It's about what do you need to do your role and to support your boss in their role. That could be marketing trends, sales analysis, HR legislation, health and safety news. It could be political news, given the current climate we in the UK are in. Then you have to look at where are those key sources, which are my key, what provides me with that information. Is it emails? Does it come from Microsoft Teams if that's what you have? Is it WhatsApp? Is it the project management system? Do I get it by phone? You know, when you come in the office, what do you look at and read first? And that may well vary from project to project. It may also depend on, are your key sources internal or external? And then the fourth thing to think about is who are, as Andy Groves called them, your Cassandras? Who are the people as well that provide you with the best sources of information? So how do we manage your time and the key information that we have? Well, here are there are 7 now. I added a couple in. 7 top tips to manage your time and your information effectively. Having done that hard process of, as we showed you in the slide before, that hard process of first of all working out what is the key information I need, what are the key sources, and who are the key people. Because don't forget, not everything comes electronically, or it may come electronically, but you still need to know of those who are the key people. So where do we begin to manage? Well, if any of you have heard me do my email management, email best practice workshops, you'll know, and this applies to everything. Stop all the distractions. Turn off all those new notifications is the first thing. The alerts, collaborative tools like Teams, SharePoint, WhatsApp, turn them all off so that you are not being continually distracted. Give yourself a chance to think. So allocate time to coordinating and processing that information. Draw the bigger picture. Make and create some, dare I say, knowledge out of the information. Create a picture for yourself. 3, don't try and multitask while you are trying to handle and manage the information that you've got. Whatever anybody says, multitasking doesn't work. People think they can multitask looking at their iPhone talking to you, maybe being in a meeting as well, it just doesn't work. We are less productive. I could spend the whole of this session on that. So stop being distracted and then focus your time. In my email workshops, I call it put aside quality time, and the same goes here. Decide for yourself, this is the time that I need to sort through all this information which I know is key for my job, and we'll talk about the other few in a minute, storing and sharing. And don't forget to take a break. You may decide this afternoon is the time I'm going to coordinate all the information for the boss in order to prepare the budget, or focus on preparing the next away day, the next board meeting. But it's important that you always take a break. Remember the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes has been shown to be the optimum time for concentrating. So you might want to set a little alarm. There are little apps as well that you can buy, or some of them are even free, that will actually prompt you if you move off the screen from the task in hand. And also a break is going to help you with your well-being, because it will reduce the chances of musculoskeletal damage. By that I mean sitting at the screen, bent over an iPad. It'll remember to keep hydrated, and remember to exercise your eyes as well. This is all around focusing your time properly and effectively. And it'll also help you recharge the batteries. You stop and you suddenly think, wait a minute, I see another piece of information that I need. The jigsaw puzzle starts to fit together. So focus, but at the same time, during that time, not more than 25 minutes. Just stop, even if it's only for a few seconds. Okay, so you look at each piece of information, whether it's an email, whether it's a file, whether it's a text message, whether it's a web link, whatever. Again, similar to what I would say in an email management workshop, handle each item once and once only. Remember the 4 Ds. Deal with it, that is to say, read it and then store it somewhere, perhaps with a reminder, and we'll come on to where to store them in a minute. Delete it. Perhaps you looked at it and you thought it was key and it wasn't. Never be afraid to delete. If it's a web based piece of material, you can always keep the link somewhere. Defer. You may decide it's perhaps a very large chunk of information. You will need it later, perhaps you'll come back to it tomorrow, but you can't actually deal with it today. Nothing wrong in that. When you defer, though, store it somewhere with a reminder. Don't trust to memory. I can promise you, the time I spend thinking, I'll know exactly where that is, I don't do it anymore. I either categorize or file things in a particular folder, and I make sure if it's a file that I annotate it so that I know what it means. Not the name you gave me, but the name that will mean something to me. So make sure that when you handle it once, we're starting to touch on item 7 really, that you've stored it. If you do see something and you decide that you want to share it with somebody else, make sure you share with a purpose. It's very easy in these days to see something that you think's important and then you bombard others with it. And remember, the more information you send, particularly the more emails you send, the more you will get back. If you share something in a collaborative format, such as Slack, such as Microsoft Teams, you're going to get lots of comments back. So think about, why am I sharing this? And if you are sharing it, communicate clearly why and what you expect. It's okay if you want to share something and say, I do not expect a response. But just always think, what do I expect from the recipient in return for me sharing? I've touched on, so the 7th key item, storing the information. Now again, with email, Don't just leave it sitting in there in the main inbox. Put it in a folder somewhere, even if your folder structure is very broad based and you maybe only have 3-5 big folders, but the inbox is not really a filing cabinet. It's a just a box for everything. It's like the for now room, really. Try and move things around into at least a few key folders. Some of you, I'm sure, have also got very detailed folders. If it's a file, if it's a web link, then if it's a file, you may have a shared network. You may be a VA working on your own on lots of different projects. So again, a good filing system is important. There are things, one of the things I find is fantastic is an electronic notebook. I use OneNote. So whenever I see what I think might be a potentially interesting article on the web, I immediately copy and paste that into my OneNote, and my OneNote is like an electronic filing cabinet. I've got lots of different folders. So I've got email, I've got cybercrime, I've got GDPR, I've got time management. For on a social side, I've got things like wine. Now you know what time I recorded. And as I said earlier, remember it costs at least $150 if you lose something, and that's the cost of both producing it and the time it takes you to find it. So it's important you store it. I also, by the way, there's nothing wrong with a paper workbook, a notebook. I have lots of lovely notebooks so that if people give me information when I'm out, I don't like to get out my iPhone, but I always have a pen and paper to hand. So those are 7 top tips there to manage your time and manage the key information. So we've dealt with the things that you need. Now what about all the dross, all the stuff you don't need? How do we filter out the noise, as I call it? Well, again, I come back to email. Email is one of the biggest sources of information overload. So think about, first of all, unsubscribing, getting yourself off distribution lists where you can. Otherwise, filters, rules, whatever, put things in folders that you don't need so that you can see the wood for the trees at the end of the day. If it's social media, think about, it's an exercise I went through at one stage. You might want to follow on Twitter, unfollow people. That's easy. If it's Twitter, again, use one of the apps like TweetDeck to create some lists for the really key people who provide you with that 80%, the 20% that give you the 80% of the news and the items that you need. If it's LinkedIn, if it's Facebook, you can stay connected, stay friends, but unfollow them so that they're not cluttering up the home page when you go to it to find that key information. Look at all the newsletters, all of those other things that you get information from, and basically stop them coming your way. So we've looked at how we manage the information, how we try and cut out the noise, but now how do we work with other people? As I said at the beginning, I think one of the major problems is in this day and age, as we move into the second decade of this century, it is that everybody uses different channels. I probably use 6 or 7 different channels, perhaps depending on who I'm dealing with. But similarly, other people will use several different channels when they send you information. So what you have to start to think about, it's a picture of wine here. It's rather like going into a great wine bar or seeing a fantastic wine list. Where do we begin to choose the bottle that suits us? And of course, there are a set of rules that one very rapidly goes through. For example, what food is it going with? What do the people I'm drinking with like? Red, white? Do they like a Pinot? Do they like a Merlot? Do they like a Cabernet Sauvignon? Do they like a light wine, a heavy wine? There's the vineyard it comes from, and there's the price. And so it is. So there's a set of rules and a set of guidelines which unconsciously, subconsciously rather, we go through. And so it is with managing information. And what I see very few people doing, which is one of the keys now to working together, is to have some kind of an information policy, some kind of strategy, guidelines, processes for clarifying what channels do other people use and what channels do you use to communicate. So there's an obvious way of starting to work with your boss. You can start to agree which channel is best for which purpose. So for example, I often, when I work with a boss and an EA or a PA like yourself, it's often WhatsApp or a text which is used for the really, really urgent stuff. Flight delayed, running late, can you do something? For sharing a lot of information, increasingly one-to-one, I'm seeing people use OneNote, and there's a brilliant blog on my website done for me by another EA. It's also about how do you both, going back to email, how do you both manage the inbox so you draw to each other's attention what are the key emails that must be dealt with. So it is about trying to sit down and out of that morass of applications you've got within the office, or if you, I say, are a VA is working out what are the channels that the other person prefers and works for them. What do you like? What works for you? And trying to come to some sort of an agreement or some sort of understanding for yourself about which channel to use for that purpose. So I now can break up and can work out some friends I know and some clients love WhatsApp, others like email, others like text. Some never use WhatsApp, so I have to very mentally think, if I want to get some information from one of my Cassandras, what's the best channel? And when you've done that together, if you haven't already got it going across your team and across the organization, then that's when perhaps you can be leaders. I've seen a lot about some of the things you can do now and will want to do to expand your career. That's then when maybe you can take the bull by the horns and say, isn't it time we had some sort of information management policy? Is a big word, charter, but we start to use, instead of layer upon layer, let's try and refine this and filter out some of the channels that we really don't find very useful and home in on the ones that we find the most useful. There's a quick reminder, those of you who want some ideas on how to manage email. So that's a little bit about what we've done, a quick overview there. Hopefully I've helped you have a look at some definitions, why it's become a problem, where is the information coming from, how do you deal with it in terms of prioritizing and filtering, how do you manage all the different streams so that you're not constantly distracted, and how do you store the key information once you've found it. If you want some more help, there's my website. You can follow me on Twitter. You can sign up for, up here, the newsletter. We produce an e-briefing roughly once a month of tips and hints and articles on all matters now, email and social media. There's some great blogs on the blog channel, as I mentioned. If you go there and you key in OneNote, you'll find one. And of course, for email specific, which still probably contributes 50, if not 60% of our information overload, there are the two books, Taking Control of Your Inbox, Brilliant Email, and of course there are the workshops and the webinars and the masterclasses and the coaching that we do and we offer. So once again, thank you very much for listening to this webinar on managing information overload. If you've got any questions, please do email me, info@mesmo.co.uk, and I will try to answer them and help you. Otherwise, I wish you good luck, and I hope that you manage to get the information overload down, improve your well-being, and improve your performance. Thank you.